Herbalist and Herbs is the home of Harry Chrissakis, a medical herbalist. Although Harry is a trained herbalist, the application of natural medicine is wider, including herbs, supplements, nutraceuticals, diet nutritional agents, mild forms of exercise, and water therapy, and if necessary, therapeutic body work. Harry Chrissakis' approach to natural healing involves the use of multiple non-toxic modalities to elicit change and healing based on the principles of following the laws of the body, supporting its strengths and self-correcting nature, and doing no harm. Harry has been on the show in the springtime, and or maybe it was between winter and spring, and I've asked him if he would come to on the show every seasonal transition, since that is a time that we could use some help, and because it's a little hard to make that transition. And he's very knowledgeable in this. So welcome back.
Hi, Diane. Thanks for having me again.
Okay.
So this is spring and summer allergies, poison oak, and other nasty things. I don't know how much we're going to get into the other nasty things, but definitely the allergies and poison oak.
All right.
So
talk right into the mic.
Yes, I mostly want to talk about pollen allergies, because those are the things that really give people a really bad time. And the way I want to approach it is two ways. I'll give you information on how to approach it symptomatically, that is when people are in the heat of the problem, and also constitutionally, which is really the longer term game plan to actually heal the area that's causing the problem. So I'm going to go into the constitutional stuff first, because it's bigger and deeper, and it gives you an idea of the approach of natural medicine to something like allergies. Because again, it's really a global approach, and you're trying to get people better, period. One of the ways that you know that your therapies are working, and you generally give people programs during the off season, that is during the winter, fall and winter, to begin to set them up for the spring. And what you're trying to do is to normalize the areas that are going to respond to these kind of allergic tickets that set it off. So one of the things that you study, at least I study, is also traditional Chinese medicine. And part of their approach when they work with the respiratory system in relationship to allergies is through the digestive tract. And that's a common approach. Just to give you an idea of a Western natural approach, many children suffer from an allergic type of asthma now, and one of the basic treatments that you do when you treat them is to give them fish oils and pro and prebiotics. And this begins to, especially long-term and slow, this begins to have a pronounced effect on those kind of responses. Now, there's more things you have to do, but it just gives you an idea that you're working more through the digestive tract and not directly on the respiratory system. Now, in truth, you're working in both areas, especially when you come more into the season. But again, to go back to the basic problems, the gut and the lungs and the whole respiratory system, including your sinuses, are all connected. Your immunological responses can be completely thrown askew by the fact that you've got upper GI difficulties, which many, many people do. It's really common. So those are the areas that you want to try and get in order on the off season. And then when you come into your season, then you can begin to treat more symptomatically. And hopefully, if your therapy has been done well and you've accomplished what you want, the symptoms will be less, they'll be less frequent, and they'll be less harsh as well. And of course, you want to eliminate them completely if you want. And generally, these programs are long-term. So in order to turn our body around, it should be done slowly. That is my method of approach. I don't particularly care for heroic approaches of explosive type fasting and purging. It's just a bit hard on our bodies. And a lot of the people I work with are physically compromised and can't really handle that kind of stuff. So let's start with some nuts and bolts stuff so that you can get an idea of what I'm trying to do and how I'm trying to do it. So when you have upper GI stuff, and it could be what you consider relatively mild stuff, like bloating and some discomfort after meals, or maybe there's some degree of nausea occasionally, or maybe an appetite loss, gas. Well, all those things are indicative that somehow the digestive tract is not doing its thing well. And one of the basic treatments that is pretty undervalued, even in natural medicine, are bitters. Very simple bitters formulas. Again, in terms of childhood asthma, it would be one of the things that I would also use to begin to help that kind of problem. And bitters I use in a lot of settings. I mean, I see a lot of people for what they come in initially as very diverse problems, but many of them have upper GI stuff. And the reason is because we're very stressed out, for one thing. The other thing is poor diet, of course. But really, you can't get rid of the idea of stress, especially long-term, having a major impact on the upper GI and the immune system in general, and ultimately the respiratory response to things like pollen or a small part of particulate matter in the air, for that matter.
So when you speak about bitters, does that mean bitter?
It means bitter.
That taste.
Yeah,
bitter.
Even bitter vegetables,
Yes.
or like radicchio, arugula, dandelion leaf. That stuff's great.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, especially in the summer when it's abundant, but it's great stuff even in winter. And that also includes cooking vegetables that are slightly bitter, like collard greens. Mm-hmm. A lot of them have been bred out, so they don't have those kinds of flavors anymore, but that's how the strains are. They have a little bit of bitter in them, and it's actually a pretty appealing taste once you kind of get next to it.
I used to tell my kids, bitter is better.
Right.
I'm not sure why.
In the American culture, we're not real strong on that idea. Our bitter is coffee, which is, for digestively, not the best idea. But it's great stuff, too. Don't misunderstand. Anyway, to get back to the idea of bitters, these are ideas that really had blossomed at the end of the 1800s in American herbalism, with the real rise of the eclectic and physiomedical schools. And if you read their writings, they consider bitters a major medicine and also upper GI problems as part of a psychic dysfunction, which I think means they're talking about stress. So again, one of the things when I'm working with people, even to just help de-stress them, is the use of bitters, because they're also relaxing to the upper GI. Now, you can take a bitters formula and alter it any way you want. You can add herbs in that help relax the gut too, because some people have very nervous stomachs. So you would use stuff like, in your bitters formulas, you would add something like blue vervain or hops. Right? If someone had a very flaccid stomach, that is, they had very slow digestion, something like red root is really good, really wonderful. Collinsonia, and those are good vascular and lymphatic tonics as well. I mean, they're major league. So anyway, you get the idea that bitters really help balance the upper GI, and they have to taste bitter, meaning that you don't have to put a lot of bitters formula in your mouth, but you have to get that bitter response on your tongue to get the neural hormonal mediation of the gut and the brain to coordinate again, because that's been tweaked out due to mostly stress, long-term stress, and also, again, poor diet.
Is green tea a bitter?
No, not that I know. Great stuff, though.
It seems like it tastes bitter.
I like it. It's definitely
astringent, maybe?
That's the term.
Okay.
It's more astringent than bitter. Okay. But I'm a big advocate of green tea and green tea extracts. In general, I use them a lot in my practice. Okay, so anyway, to go back to the gut, once again, bitters are great for a lot of things. Like I said, asthma as well. So gut flora, that's a big deal, right? There's a lot of dysbiosis that goes on. And that goes back again to the idea of using pro and prebiotics. And a lot of people don't know what prebiotics are. Well, they're the things that you can buy them separately, but generally if you want a decent formula in probiotics, it should have a prebiotic in it. The one that they use commonly is FOS, and it's good, fructooligosaccharides. Now, along with those things, fish oils and GLA, from borage oil specifically, because borage is very high in GLA. It's higher than primrose. It's almost twice as high. Because, once again, these things do lots of things to go into the pro and prebiotics, I mean, that's obvious that the gut needs these kind of critters there. And a lot of immunological function is dependent upon the balance of all those critters in our gut to get things to work right. Fish oils and GLA are both systemic anti-inflammatories. I use them in a wide variety of settings. And in order to normalize people's bodies, again, in relationship to allergies, I use them as well. And fats are critically important both in the off-season and especially during acute crises of any inflammatory nature. So when a person is under the influence of the allergy season that they go into, one of the things that they really want to stay tight on is the quality of fats that they eat in their diet. And basically what I tell people about fats is this. I separate them out into dietary fats and supplementary fats. Your dietary fats are primarily extra virgin olive oil and butter and coconut oil. Now, people think that's insane, butter. Butter is a primo fat. Do not be fooled. And of course, I'm talking about organic products as well. So it's a short chain. This is about butter. Butter is a short chain saturated fatty acid that our cells like to use as fuel. It also is a good source of vitamin A. It's got a bunch of things in it that our body just utilizes. And also, we've been doing dairy for 5,000 years. In my general approach to helping people, things like cutting out whole sections of food is only dependent upon their specific condition. So do I think milk is bad? Yes, for a person that responds negatively to it, especially in terms of allergies. But what if they were hot and dry? Because milk is a cooling yin substance. So I would say yes, drink milk, as long as you don't get any kind of negative response that contributes to the problem. And of course, again, I mean either organic milk or raw milk. I don't mean generally what's commercially on the shelf, because a lot of those kinds of foods have problems built into them. So again, the idea of fats is very important if during an allergic attack or anything. I mean, when we go into poison oak or a cold, you're chowing down on chips and deep fry, or part of your dietary regime has margarine in it, or any kind of poor quality omega-6 fats, they just push inflammation. Period. Across the board. They damage our bodies in so many ways, it's hard to actually list. So get them out of your diet anyway, because they're no good. And all they do is hurt you. And replace them with the simple things that I mentioned, which taste good, are nutritionally very rich. I mean, they are actually bordering food medicines and actually add to our health. Okay, so you get the idea that fats are a problem if they're poor quality. That has to be remembered. And of course, again, in the heat of the problem, when you're having a problem, if you're, again, doing way too much refined carbohydrate and sugar, these are also pro-inflammatory type foods. So all they do is degrade your possibilities of recovering and make things harder for you. Okay, to get back to the gut. Sometimes people have repeated use of antibiotics or steroids because they have to under the treatment plan that they're working with. That wreaks havoc on our system, both in terms of the obvious, that is, if you're using antibiotics, that it really hurts gut flora, but it hurts lots of things. And I don't want it to be misunderstood that I don't think people should take antibiotics. That's not true at all. If they need them, they should take them. Same thing is true with steroids or antidepressants or anything. But there are methods of protecting ourselves while we do these kind of things that are as important as taking the drugs. So you mitigate the side effects and don't have long and short-term bounce from the drug, negative bounce from the drug. So again, with something like antibiotics, the best thing you can do is take a yeast called Saccharomyces boulardii. Now, I use this stuff with chemo and radiation as well to protect the gut lining. It's very good. And of course, along with that is, again, the idea of pro and prebiotics. Again, if you're going to do these kinds of things, you have to do these kinds of drugs. You want to, once again, try to rebalance the system. And again, adaptogenic herbs play a major role in that. They also, I'm going to get more to them, but just to give you an idea, they just have a great stabilizing effect on both the central nervous system and the central hormonal axis, both of which start to get skewed from long-term use of these kind of drugs, long-term stressors, poor diet, most things that get us in trouble. Now, when you want to rebuild gut cells, and that would be a natural thing that you'd want to do, again, post-antibiotic or a heavy treatment of chemo and or long-term stress, period, the amino acid glutamine is excellent. Now, what you see commonly is L-glutamine, and that's pretty good. If you get a magnesium-bound glutamine, it's about 10 times more absorbable. Of course, you're going to pay more money. Now, glutamine is an interesting amino acid because our gut cells need it in large quantities, and so do certain immune cells to function properly. So, again, it comes in a bulk powder. I usually have people put it into shakes, which I design, which are wrapped around a number of other products. Occasionally, I have them just take it straight up. You just it comes with a scoop usually, so you take a scoop or a half a scoop, and that's your dose. You mix it into water and just down it. It's not terrible tasting. It's not great. In a shake that's well put together, you can't taste anything. So as you can see, I'm kind of working my way down the digestive tract and showing you different areas and different things and how you apply them. And this is how you work from a clinical perspective when you're trying to turn somebody around. And now these allergies can also be food allergies that we're working with, which really also people have that may not manifest in the classical way, but show up eventually as respiratory allergies. So again, to get back to the gut, if you are not regular in terms of going to the bathroom, that is getting regular bowel movements each day, you have an obvious problem. So, and again, this is always an area of interpretation according to some people's mentality. So when I discuss it with my clients and I ask them, are they regular? If they just say yes, then I pursue the answer a little further and often find out that what they think is normal is going to the bathroom once every 2 days. So, and that's problematic, especially long term, because you definitely absorb things across the wall of the large intestine, and certain things that are generated through those processes can be carcinogenic and or can ultimately help degrade your body enough to help it set in a disease of some type. So regularity is a big deal. Again, bitters will help that, and so will the gut flora stuff, the pre and probiotics. But one of the things that I use for obstinate constipation, it's very gentle, is flaxseed, whole flaxseed, soaked. You can't eat whole flaxseed as it is unless you rupture the capsule of the seed. If you just stick it on salads, you'll just pass it whole. This way you soak it at least 6 hours. It's usually start out with a teaspoon to a tablespoon. I have them drink it once or twice a day. And then you get all the benefits of the flaxseed plus the fiber. Now, I disrecommend the use of ground flax and or already pressed flax oil. Flax is just too delicate. It just breaks down and oxidizes like immediately as soon as you press it. So, if you want to do flax oil, then you're going to have to get your own press, and you can buy them. They're attachments that you put on juicers. They work well. They're a bit of a pain in the butt because you have to clean them, and they're a bit hard to clean. But fresh flax oil is quite amazing. I mean, it's quite different than anything that you can buy.
And are we speaking about the health of the GI tract still? Okay.
Yes.
I'm speaking to Harry Chrissakis, medical herbalist, and we're speaking about allergies and other such things. We've covered normalizing our bodies with the GI tract and the use of bitters so far.
Yes.
This is
So
KZFR.
again, to go into elimination, the use of flax, but also there's a bunch of formulas that wrap themselves around black radish, because sometimes it's also a neural response that needs to be dealt with. You can also give things to relax the large intestine too, because that's where a lot of stress goes as well. Anyway, this is an important area when you're dealing with allergies. Mm-hmm. Okay, in terms of normalizing aberrant immune responses. That is cell-to-cell communication and how things coordinate responses in our body, which in the case of allergies is completely out of whack. Adaptogens, to get back to that group of herbs again. Adaptogenic herbs are extremely balancing and fortifying. There's only about 30 or 35 of them worldwide. They are the creme de la creme in all the traditional herbal pharmacopoeias. They're at the top of the class. Now, I also use adaptogens that are known to be anti-allergenic. So they can be used during an allergy attack or in the season, as well as during the winter and or the off-season, along with many of these other things. So the things I like to use are reishi mushroom, and again, huge variance in quality. Buy a good quality product that's at least 10% polyphenols and 6% or 4% triterpenoids, and it should say that on there. Schisandra, which is another adaptogenic tonic. It's a kind of classic Chinese herb that they often use for asthma and upper respiratory stuff, but which is a fantastic adaptogenic tonic, is also anti-allergenic, and so is reishi. Ashwagandha, which again is an Ayurvedic herb. Again, all these herbs I use a lot. All the herbs that I'm talking about, I use a lot in my practice, and all the things that I'm talking about, I actually apply daily in my practice. And those are the only things that I really like to talk about when I give these kind of lectures, or when I give lectures in general, or things that I have experience using and I know work. Now, again, the idea of reishi and Schisandra and ashwagandha, and the next one would be licorice, which is, a pretty common idea. That's not licorice candy, most of which has no licorice in it. It's actually the root. And we have an Americana. Chinese have a lot of great products too. They have a couple of different species that they use of licorice that are excellent. And licorice is a really complex, broad-acting, adaptogenic, top-shelf herb. It's relatively inexpensive. So is ashwagandha, and so is Schisandra. Reishi gets kind of pricey, but the other three you can easily touch and get good quality for good price.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, if you look at traditional cultures, it's common that they do purges, fasts in the spring. And one of the things that does is, again, your liver plays a major role in your body's ability to coordinate things properly. And its ability to break things down and clear things out occurs primarily at night. You do both your rebuilding of blood albumin and the clearing of both things like broken down neurotransmitters or hormones, which can be very toxic if we don't get rid of them, through the liver at night in a dual phase process. If we impact that process, that translation doesn't happen properly and things get thrown back into the bloodstream that are problematic. So again, getting liver function right is a big deal. And again, these kind of approaches of using simple fasts and purges have their place. And once again, in my practice, I'm very ginger about giving them out, because to do any type of eliminative work, it costs energy. So the client or patient has to be in okay shape to get them to do it. If they're tired and compromised, which many people are, purges and fasts are not a great idea. And that especially applies to very serious chronic diseases like cancer.
Mm-hmm.
You do it, but again, if you're going to do things like that with, again, a person who's compromised in some way, first you get them strong, then you do very mild forms of them in the introduction. So in order to get liver function up, there's a whole bunch of things you can do. There's a whole range of Chinese formulas that you can buy as prepared medicines. And a number of these things that I'm talking about, you can go to your local healthcare practitioner or to health food stores and buy off the counter and talk to the people in the stores too who can help you find what you need. But in terms of getting liver function up, there's a lot of good traditional eclectic formulas too that we use here. And if you're into it, you can do bulk herbs as well. I mean, if you really want to trim the dollar thing, bulk herbs are the way to go. but you got to be able to deal with the taste and the work that goes into it, because most herbs just do not taste good. But they work well. So again, you can see that I'm approaching this thing in a kind of pronged way. But let's go to the to when you're actually in an allergic situation. You're gonna get back into the season, and people dread this. I mean, I've got clients that they just stay in the house. They get so beat up from the responses that they just have to stay in until it passes, and or shower multiple times a day because the responses are so negative. It makes them basically dysfunctional. So anyway, you get the idea of how miserable this kind of stuff can make you. And there's nowhere to go. It's the environment. So unless you drive to Arizona, you're living it. So of course you want to deal with it. And again, during this type of a season where it is our air that we're breathing. There's so much pollen in the air. It's amazing. You have to do things to prepare yourself for that, and while you're in it, to help yourself. And again, you got to go back to diet. If you're doing poor quality fats, if you're doing high refined carbohydrates, and that includes lots of alcohol, if you're into that, and or sugars, you're going to really push the negative process in your body. Now, I have a simple formula that I developed.
Talk closer.
I have a simple formula that I developed, maybe 10 or 15 years ago that people say they still take. I mean, I would give a more elaborate form of this idea, but it gives you an idea of structure and where you're trying to go when you're dealing with a symptomatic approach. And really, this is a symptomatic approach. This is not about rectifying the problem. All the other stuff is about rectifying the problem. This will help deal with when you're getting slammed at the time. So there's a formula out there called Haas. You use partly that, a couple of caps of that, a couple of caps of Schisandra, which you can buy, a couple of caps of freeze-dried nettle, and it's got to be freeze-dried nettle, and a cap of quercetin. Good quality quercetin is really bright yellow-orange. Schisandra, I mean, again, if you want to go by taste, is really sour. So just to give you some add-ons in there if you're doing bulk stuff, but you can buy this stuff in capsule and formula form and take it that way. I'm not going to mention the companies. If you want to, and these formulas tend to dry things out a little. If you have that problem, you just add something in like slippery elm or some form of demulcent herb. Again, licorice is great. Now, again, you can take the idea and you can kind of zoom things around with it. I often use a lot of tinctures in my practice as well for allergic responses and or say nasal congestion and stuffy head. The use of Schisandra and yerba santa, which is a local herb, is a great idea. And again, if you want to really get into the sinuses, magnolia flower and angelica root. That's not Don Quay, that's angelica root. It's different. Now, Schisandra and yerba santa, as well as a number of those things in the formula that I mentioned, like freeze-dried nettle, what they do primarily in terms of stopping allergic responses is they bind mast cells. And mast cells are the guys that just spit out huge amounts of histamine. And histamine is the stuff that just fries the tissue. If you just keep bathing it with histamine, it will just cook the tissue and it will actually burn it. So we want to get those guys normalized again, even if it's at that far end of the problem, because that's all the way at the end of it when you're getting that response. But that's fine when you're in the heat of it and you're suffering. Now, you should, if you do these formulas well, you should get a response within a half hour to 20 minutes. And if you need to take them, you can take them 2 or 3 or 4 times a day with no downside, except what I said about the drying, so you can compensate for that. Now, some of the responses in allergies are really uncomfortable things like, say, burning eyes. I get that occasionally, and I mean, it'll just cripple you. You're not going to do anything. You could stick your head underwater and it's not going to go away. It doesn't matter. The pollen has just gotten into the tissue. Those mast cells are responding, and your eyes are burning. What works magically is golden seal. I mean, it really, you begin to believe in miracles. If you just make a tea out of it and soak your eyes in it, just use a cotton soak on it, the effect is almost immediate. within a minute or two, there is no more burning. There is no more swelling. It'll reduce redness in the eyes. It's a great treatment for conjunctivitis. Excellent, really.
Is it drying?
It is drying.
Yeah.
It's astringent. But also the berberines, that whole family of chemicals that are in there, have a bunch of pronounced effects that aren't based on astringency only. I mean, golden seal you can use to keep up white blood cell count during chemotherapy. So it's got a pretty diverse effect. It was probably one of the premier herbs of the eclectics, as well as the East Coast Thompsonians, who were big on the use of golden seal and cayenne pepper. But to get back to the idea is, the use of these kind of things is great. If you want to get decent quality golden seal, and it's expensive, you can buy it as a reasonable price product, as a freeze-dry product. That way you'll be ensured that you're going to get decent quality. Otherwise, if you go to the health food store and buy bulk, make sure it's got a real strong nose on it, and it's real bitter and yellow. And if you use it, be careful, because it is a dye. It will stain everything. It's also good for the mucosa in your mouth. It's excellent for gum problems. But again, you can't leave it in very long because it'll begin to stain your teeth. But it works great. Works great on loose gums, sore gums, bleeding gums. So anyway, and again, all those kind of things people have when they have allergies as well, because again, it's a systemic problem expressing itself. Okay, that's going to cover pretty much what I do in terms of respiratory allergies and pollen allergies. You can do, and within that framework, you can expand on that and flesh out pretty far, as whichever way you want to go. But these are the basic ideas that I apply. And again, this is most of this stuff is long-term treatment. Most of what I gave you is for trying to get rid of the problem. And then the other stuff is really more the symptomatic approach. So now on to another nasty thing, poison oak and poison ivy. So on the East Coast where I grew up, poison ivy is the thing. And it's brutal if you're allergic to it. But I must say, poison oak is worse. It seems more acrid, more penetrating, lasts longer, and produce worse results on the skin. So it's pretty nasty stuff, and it'll make your life miserable while you have it. Now, when I get exposed, or I think I've been exposed, and I'm pretty sensitive to this kind of stuff, I just immediately wash with hard alcohol. I just wash the area gently. And the alcohol seems to get rid of any of the oils, because it's a very irritating oil that the poison oak has. We'll break it down and wash it off. You can use rubbing alcohol if you want. It's fine, it will work. I'll just pour it over it and just gently brush it off it. Now, this is before there's any reddening of the skin. This is something like, for me, I'm hypersensitive, so I can feel that stuff, that something's wrong. But for you, if you just think you have that, then it's a good thing to use. Now, along with that kind of thing, you want to use some type of anti-inflammatory formula. You can use the same formula that I use on respiratory allergies for this kind of a skin response, and the same principles of diet for the same thing while you're suffering, especially to calm down on all those things that unfortunately we like too much. Now, topically, there's a number of things you can do, but one that I like that's really easy is manzanita. And, that always gets an eyebrow raised, but manzanita leaves is you just soak about 10 or 12 leaves, cook them for about a half hour, and then just use that as a topical compress. You can also make a quart of tea and pour it into your bath water, sit in that bath, and then when you're done, you can pat yourself dry. If you do this bath too much, it's a bit drying, so you can use just a localized compress. If the tissue becomes too dry, you can use something like aloe vera. It works great.
Great. We're speaking with Harry Chrissakis, Chrisssakis, and his website is Herbalist and Herbs, and he makes regular presentations in the Chico area. When are you coming back?
Actually, I'm making one tonight at the Butte County Library on Sherman Avenue.
Uh-huh.
It'll
What's
be
the
on
topic?
Cancer. Chemo, cancer, and natural medicine.
Uh-huh. What time?
At 6:30.
Okay. 6:30 tonight.
And
That's
yes,
good
I
time.
lecture at the library about twice a month there. So you can, and it's free.
Is that on your website when you're coming?
Usually, yes. I have a
Okay.
calendar on the site, so you
Okay.
can tap into it.
Great. Okay. Again, that's Herbalist and Herbs, Harry Chrissakis, Chrisssakis. All right. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Diane.
Yeah, you
Thanks to
covered a
KZFR
lot,
too.
and he'll be back again in the fall, and we'll see what his next topic will be. He's got some time to decide. And you're tuned into One World Music. I'm your host, Diane Suzuki. Thank you. Thanks, Harry.
Sure, Diane. Thank you.